Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Literary Lore. Now, I've got a curveball for you today. You may recall last episode that I mentioned that I'd today be going over one of Poe's works, and the especially observant among you will notice that this is not one of his poems. No, today we'll be looking at a more contemporary poem from 1996, which is roughly 30 years ago. The Sign in My Father's Hands by Martin Espada. Unlike pretty much everybody else that we've covered, Espada still walks the earth. He's living the dream as an English professor, and he still writes. So I'm not going to be diving deep into his life and his background and speculation on who he is as a person because, he's still alive. His story is still ongoing. There's more that he has to do. Espada was born in Brooklyn. His greatest influence was his father. Frank Espada was a community organizer, civil rights activist, documentary photographer. There's a whole lot of stuff he was doing specifically for the betterment of society. Martin has written a lot of poems. He's translated the works of others, edited anthologies. He's a generally busy guy. And, most importantly to me, one of his books got banned, which is always a great sign that he's writing something actually important enough for someone to want to silence. So, we'll get to this poem shortly and get a better idea of the kind of work he writes. I just have to say, if you're interested in reading more modern pieces, please let me know, because this month I'll be focusing a lot on contemporary work for Frank Espada. Straight from the opening, this poem is dedicated to his father, which, as we've noted, was a civil rights activist. The beer company did not hire blacks or Puerto Ricans, so my father joined the picket line at the Schaefer Beer Pavilion, New York World's Fair, amid the crowds glaring with canine hostility. But the cops brandished nightsticks and handcuffs to protect the beer, and my father disappeared. This stanza lays it out pretty plainly. Schaefer Beer was a sponsor for the World Fair in 1964, and the company refused to engage in fair hiring practices. Their protest was not appreciated, to say the least. They were trespassing, disrupting the event, and evidently the more legal forms of expression were not getting the message across. You'll notice that they held signs. They were peaceful, but the cops instead beat them with nightsticks and arrested them. Quick side note, it seems a little dystopian to think about identifiable law enforcement arresting people with minimal beatings and thinking, wow, I wish we could go back to that. But, anyway, the speaker makes a point that the cops were protecting the beer, protecting a corporation as opposed to, the community. In 1964, I had never tasted beer, and no one told me about the picket signs torn in two by the cops of brewery. I knew what dead was. Dead was a cat overrun with parasites and dumped in the hallway incinerator. I knew my father was dead. I went mute and filmy-eyed, the slow boy who did not hear the question in school. I sat studying his framed photograph, like a mirror in my darker face. Like the other stanza mentions, from the speaker's perspective, his dad just disappeared. He was a kid that couldn't hope to understand the nuance of what happened. His father was gone, and gone to him meant dead. The description of his grief is fantastic. I love the way he just shows the outward visible signs of a kid going through it. The last two lines resonate with me as well, because he saw himself in his father, and judging from his writing, he was inspired to speak for others and followed in his footsteps. That said, let's see how long it takes for him to learn the truth. Days later, he appeared in the doorway, grinning with his gilded tooth. Not dead, though I would come to learn that sometimes Puerto Ricans die in jail, with bruises no one can explain swelling their eyes shut. I would learn too that boycott is not a boy's haircut, that I could sketch a picket line on the blank side of a leaflet. So his dad's released in a matter of days, almost like the point of arresting him was to remove/intimidate him without any real legal standing. But this reunion comes with lessons. He mentions the cruelty Puerto Ricans endure to the point of death, as well as the weapons at his disposal. Boycott and protest. I also like the last two lines of this stanza too. He's sketching a picket line on a leaflet. It could be the way of just a way of saying that he could write his protest into existence through his poetry. In an interview back in 2016, he said, "I grew up in my father's household. Resistance was as natural as breathing. I was surprised when I went into the world and discovered that not everybody was raised the way I was. So when it turned to the writing of poetry, quite naturally it turned to poetry about social justice." At other times, he said that to be a poet is to give a voice to the silenced. And these all may seem like grand statements about writing, but the only reason people may discredit the act of writing is because they don't understand the impact and value it has. Words are how we express ourselves. Words give us the chance to confront new ideas. We wouldn't constantly have books getting banned or challenged unless people feared the words. This is my Bible. If I'm afraid that another book is going to have words more powerful than what's in here, then this is not worth the paper it's printed on. If I want to claim something is unbeatable, I don't remove the competition. If I go outside and I believe something false, say that the earth is flat, I need to be prepared for people to present their ideas to me, their proof. And when I realize that my words don't stand up to the scrutiny, then my thoughts should change. But if I ban globes and space exploration, I get to keep being ignorant at the expense of ever knowing more. Espada is showing people the curvature of the earth. If your worldview is at odds with his, it is only right to allow the two to come into conflict naturally and allow discourse to determine the victor. All that said, let's see that final stanza. That day my father returned from the netherworld, easily as riding the elevator to apartment 14F, and the brewery cops could only watch in drunken disappointment. I searched my father's hands for a sign of the miracle. And our poet sticks the landing. Brilliantly done. The victory in these lines, conquering the death he believed had befallen his father, and the drunk cops trying to protect the beer rendered just as ineffectual. Like I've done with the previous stanzas, I want to draw attention to the final two lines. It's a biblical allusion to the crucifixion of Christ. According to the Gospels, Jesus literally conquered death and returned. One of his apostles, Thomas, famously requested to see the wounds in his hands where he had been hung by the nails. Here, there is the additional context that Espada's father had been in a picket line. The sign in his father's hands refers both to the biblical miracle of resurrection and the reason his father was attacked. But most importantly, this poem immortalizes that struggle. An event in 1964, a choice by people seeking justice, inspired a boy to write this poem when he became a man. A poem that ensures that moment won't be forgotten if there are people to share the story. It serves as a reminder that what we do now will affect the future. Our actions will carry on in the life and work of the next generation. His father fought for equity and justice, and that mattered. While the specific event may not have had a big splash, their organization CORE, or the Congress of Racial Equality, were successful in a variety of other endeavors. I suggest looking it up if you want to see how far-reaching their movement was. It's got some really great notes. The point is, the beauty of this poem is that it is a kid looking up to his dad, his hero, and that simple act of living was defiance against the powers trying to snuff him out. And I think that's pretty cool. This poem is from a collection called Imagine the Angels of Bread. If you enjoyed this poem, I highly suggest getting the book. It's surprisingly cheap, and it's got plenty more poems to check out. The next few episodes I'm working on are going to get progressively more modern, more relevant, so I hope you stay tuned for that. Please leave a like and subscribe. And you know what? You can go ahead and also share this with a friend. Until next time, Carpe Diem.